Back in October, everything was going great for the Padres. They had just scored 6 runs against the Dodgers in the bottom of the second inning in Game 3 of the National League Division Series and eventually won that game to take a 2-1 series lead. After that second inning, though, they didn't score a run over the next 24 innings, lost the series to the eventual World Series champion Dodgers, watched them sign a ton of great players in free agency, along with the player they wanted the most in Roki Sasaki, and they haven't even made one key addition so far this offseason. Along with this, there's an ongoing lawsuit over the ownership of the Padres, and there's been question marks with the payroll over the last 2 years. So yeah, things are a mess right now with the Padres, and it's very possible they end up making some trades to try and free up some payroll so they can go make other additions in free agency, as well as replenish their farm system a little bit. So in this video, I'm going to go over some trade proposals for the Padres to help them for 2025 and the future. Let's get to it. Let's start this off with Luis Suarez. Now, Suarez is a pretty polarizing player. You got one half of people that think he's one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball, but then you got the other half that think, well, he really just hits a bunch of singles. Nonetheless, did have a pretty solid year this past year. Hit .314, on base at a .346, a 109 WRC+. The one problem, like I mentioned, though, is, yeah, he does hit a lot of singles. The slugging percentage went down a lot this past year, only .392. But with Suarez, this is a guy you can put at the top of your lineup. He's an absolute table setter. He's a perfect leadoff hitter, in my opinion. He puts the ball in play, doesn't really strike out. I think it would be a solid addition for a lot of teams out there. Now, why would the Padres want to trade Suarez? Well, he is due to make $14 million in arbitration this year. So, yeah, that's a pretty good chunk of change that I'm sure the Padres would love to get off their payroll, and I think they would survive without him. Now, you got Jake Cronenworth. He can move around in the infield. He could possibly play first base, or you can go for a cheaper option out there, whether that's a free agent, maybe someone on the trade market, whatever it may be. But I think Suarez is pretty expendable for the Padres, and I think other teams out there would benefit more from him. And one team that I got in my mind are the Seattle Mariners. I mean, to me, the Mariners would be the perfect fit. You take a look at how they were this past year. You know, they struggled mightily getting on base. They struck out a ton. Well, here you go. Luis Suarez would be the perfect addition to this lineup, along with Julio Rodriguez, Cal Riley, Randy Rosarena in the middle of the order. He's the perfect table setter for the Mariners. So in this deal, I got Luis Suarez heading to the Mariners and back to the Padres. I got a competitive balance pick and a pitching prospect, Michael Morales. Now, the Padres over the last couple of years, they've unloaded a lot of prospects. I think it would benefit them a lot to get a draft pick back in this deal, so that way they can start to replenish that farm system. And hey, they can pick whoever they want in the upcoming draft. And then I got Michael Morales here as well. Pretty solid pitching prospect, number 13 in the Mariners system. I mean, the Mariners, they got so much pitching in their organization. I think they would be just fine if they parted with someone like Michael Morales, a guy with a 4-pitch mix, throws a decent amount of strikes, had pretty solid numbers this past year, had a record of 13-2 with a 3.02 ERA. Gives the Padres another pitcher to put back into their farm system. Now, I could also maybe see the New York Mets, depending on what happens with Pete Alonso. Now, obviously, Luis Suarez is not going to be replacing the power production of Pete Alonso, but what you could do with Suarez is put him as your leadoff guy, and then you could have Lindor or Soto in the 2 spot, and then the other guy in the 3 spot. So you'd have a very solid middle of the order, and then you got a table setter in Luis Suarez there. I think that'd be pretty solid. So the deal that I have here is Suarez going to the Mets, and back to the Padres. We got a pitching prospect in Jonah Tong, along with an infield prospect in Trey Snyder. Now, Jonah Tong, as of right now, is the number 10 prospect in their system. Very under the radar this past year. Pretty solid numbers overall. A 3.03 ERA over 25 games, 23 starts. Good strikeout to walk ratio. 160 strikeouts compared to 47 walks over 113 innings pitched. Good velo on the fastball, graded at a 65. Curveball at a 55. Has a slider and a changeup as well. And then we got one more guy here, the number 17 prospect in their system, Trey Snyder. Not really a whole lot of experience in pro ball, just drafted this past year in the 5th round. A guy that, he's going to have a pretty decent approach at the plate, makes a decent amount of contact, decent plate discipline. Luis Suarez, I think, would be perfect for the Mariners. I think the Mets could be a good fit as well if Pete Alonso doesn't go back. Up next, let's talk about Robert Suarez. You know the deal with Suarez. This guy throws gas, has good stuff. He's been one of the better relievers in the game for the last few years, and he's coming off another solid year. ERA at a 2.77, FIP at a 3.49, over 65 innings pitched. Now, you would like to see a bit more on the strikeouts. Only 8 strikeouts per 9 this past year, only 7.8 back in 2023, but it does a good job at keeping the walks down. 2.2 walks per 9 this past year, right around a home run per 9. Suarez would be a solid addition for a lot of bullpens out there. Now, he is on a decent-sized contract for a reliever, 5 years, $46 million, AAV at $9.2 million per year. So, yeah, this would be a nice contract for the Padres to try and clear. They got some other relievers in that bullpen that could potentially take over the closer role. I mean, if you're thinking about some other guys, they brought in Jason Adam. He had a very good year this past year. I mean, he could definitely step into the closer role there. One team that I have in mind are the Cincinnati Reds, right? They just traded away Fernando Cruz to the Yankees, so maybe they could bring in another guy for the bullpen here. You do have Alexis Diaz at the back end of the bullpen. You got Pagan, but I feel like you need something else back there. I think Suarez would be a nice addition. So the trade that I have is Robert Suarez with some cash going to the Reds and back to the Padres. You got a couple of pitching prospects, Luis May and Luke Hayden. Now, I do have a little cash attached to Robert Suarez because the production that he's putting out on the field isn't quite matching up what he's getting paid. So he's a little bit underwater. So I'm putting $2 million per year over the next 3 years. So that way the Padres can get a little something back in return. So the guy leading the way in terms of value is Luis May, number 24 in their system. This guy is pretty much a future reliever. This past year had a 3.44 ERA over 40 appearances out of the bullpen. This guy's got great velo, 70 grade on the fastball, has a slider to go along with it. Could do a little better at throwing some strikes, but this could be a good future reliever to add to your organization. Also have Luke Hayden here, number 29 in their system, just got drafted this past year out of high school, 55 fastball, has a curveball, slider, changeup as well, 4-pitch mix. Maybe the Padres can develop him moving forward. Now, another team that I think could be a nice fit would be the Toronto Blue Jays. And we know the deal with the Blue Jays this offseason. They've been having a bit of a tough time, trying to land those guys in free agency. Yes, they got Santander. Yes, they got Hoffman. But it has not been easy for them to try and land these guys. Let's see what happens with Pete Alonso. Another bullpen guy could make a lot of sense, even after the addition of Jeff Hoffman. Now, you got Hoffman, Green, Garcia. Maybe Swanson can have a better year this coming year. But adding a guy like Suarez to the back end of the bullpen really gives them a couple of good options here. So the trade that I have is Suarez and some cash heading to Toronto, and back to the Padres. You got Mason Flaharty and Desan Brown. Now, Desan Brown leads the way in terms of value, and I could see Brown being someone that AJ Preller would be intrigued with. A guy that is super athletic. If you take a look at the run grade, has an 80 overall, does a pretty good job at getting on base, had a 342 on base this past year, 723 OPS overall. You'd like to see a little bit more pop, but still, this is the kind of a prospect AJ Preller likes. Then I got Mason Flaharty, the number 26 prospect here, ERA at a 3.63. Again, another reliever that would be heading back in this deal. A guy, a lefty reliever here, really 2 pitches that he plays with, a cutter and a slider. Has a 70 grade on the slider. I think that could be a solid addition for the Padres. And for another team, how about the Phillies? I just mentioned Jeff Hoffman not too long ago. He went to the Blue Jays. Also, Carlos Estevez, he's probably going to be heading elsewhere. I feel like they need to add something else to the back end of this bullpen. I know they brought in Jordan Romano, but he had a terrible year this past year. Had trouble staying on the field, had a lot of injuries he dealt with. So I feel like adding Suarez would be some good insurance for the back end. I know they got Matt Strahm, they got Kerkering here, Alvarado, but that would be a big arm to add in Suarez. So the deal that I have is Suarez and some cash heading to the Phillies. Back to the Padres, got a pitching prospect in Michael Mercado and Griff McGarry. Now, Mercado, as of right now, is the number 18 prospect in their system. He had a cup of coffee this past year with the Phillies, put up some solid numbers in AAA this past year, 2.07 ERA over 32 games, 10 starts. So this is a guy that, could also potentially be a reliever. Who knows? Maybe he could be a starter at some point. But then we got Griff McGarry. This is a higher ranked pitching prospect at one point. Ended up converting to a reliever. He's had a lot of problems when it comes to the control, but he has good velo, has good stuff. Maybe a change of scenery can do him some good. Maybe the Padres can figure something out with him. Whatever it may be, I think Robert Suarez, I could definitely see him getting moved at some point because of the salary that he's going to be making this coming year along with the next few years. That'd be some nice payroll relief for the Padres, and they have other guys that could take over the closer role. Moving on to Michael King, and King was the main piece that went back to the Padres in the Juan Soto trade last offseason, and I've been thinking here the Padres should sign this guy up to an extension. He was very good this past year. 31 games, 30 starts, over 170 innings pitched, ERA at 2.95, FIP at a 3.33, a 3.9 F-WAR overall. Good strikeout to walk ratio, 10.4 strikeouts per nine, 3.2 walks per nine, under a home run per nine. I'm just saying, Padres, sign this guy up. But if you don't want to work out an extension or you don't got the money to get it done, trade Michael King, because teams are always looking for starting pitching. Yes, he is going to be a free agent after this year, but because of the value of starting pitching, you're going to be able to get a pretty solid return for Michael King, even if it is just 1 year. Now, one team that comes to mind, right? I'm thinking of the Padres. What do the Padres need? Well, they could use something out in the outfield, especially now that Jerickson Profar has gone to the Atlanta Braves. And one team that could have an outfielder are the Baltimore Orioles. Now, they just signed Dylan Carlson to a deal, so maybe that could possibly make someone like Heston Kjerstad available. Maybe you could center a package around him. And for the Orioles, yes, they have added to this rotation, even though they didn't bring back Corbin Burns, right? You brought in Charlie Morton, you brought in Tomoyuki Sagano, but adding someone like Michael King coming off a strong year, I think would be a very nice boost for this rotation. That would give them a pretty deep rotation overall. So the trade that I have, Michael King going to the Orioles, back to the Padres, they get a young outfielder that they can put into their outfield right away in Heston Kjerstad. And I also have Dean Kramer here. If not Dean Kramer, maybe you could do a younger pitcher like Chase McDermott, a guy that's one of their top prospects in their system, has pretty solid value overall. Maybe you could do someone like him. I think these two could be pretty solid trade partners. I would love to see Heston Kjerstad get a chance, the number 2 pick back in the 2020 draft. And hey, for the Padres, they got an opening in their outfield as of right now. Now, when it comes to some other teams, I got the Angels, right? Yes, they added Yusei Kikuchi, very solid addition to that rotation, but I feel like they need a little bit more. Sure, Kyle Hendricks, they added him, but, I don't know what Kyle Hendricks is going to give you these days. And Michael King, hey, he would definitely give them a boost. So the trade that I have here is Michael King heading to the Angels. But one thing the Angels have, like I mentioned with Heston Kjerstad and the Orioles, is an outfielder, Taylor Ward. You could send him back to the Padres, and that would give them a everyday left fielder. And I've also got a couple of prospects. We got Jack Economowicz, young pitching prospect, as well as Matthew Lugo. As of right now, Matthew Lugo is pretty blocked with the Angels, right? He's blocked at short. You got Christian Moore at second base. Obviously, Anthony Rendon. What the heck's going to happen with him? I think Matthew Lugo could be expendable at this point. A guy that can move around. He could play some other positions, and I think that could be valuable for the Padres. He had a breakout year in the minor leagues this year. Like I said, with Taylor Ward, that would be an everyday outfielder that the Padres can plug into their lineup. He's under control for the next couple of years. And Jack Economowicz, he had a decent-sized cup of coffee this past year, up and down with the results, but gives the Padres a young pitcher in return. And also, if the Angels were to trade Taylor Ward, they could go after Pete Alonso to play first base, and then Nolan Schanuel could move out to left field, or they can go after another outfielder, maybe Harrison Bader for center field. You can move Mike Trout over to left, or maybe Alex Verdugo. Why not the Chicago Cubs? They did add Matthew Boyd this offseason, but again, why not upgrade a pretty solid rotation as is? You'd have Michael King, Shota Imanaga, Justin Steele, Tyone, Boyd. That's a really strong 1 through 5. Here's the deal. Michael King going to the Cubs, and back to the Padres. We got Assad, but also one of their top prospects, a top 100 prospect as of right now, in Kevin Alcantara. Now, this is a guy had a very small cup of coffee this past year with the Cubs, but he's essentially blocked at this point. That outfield is full. It's going to be hard for him to try and find some playing time. This is a guy where he's 6'6". Put a little more size onto that frame. I mean, there's a lot of projection here with Alcantara, a guy that can do a lot of everything, right? Hits for average, he gets on base, has power, has speed, pretty good defensively as well. could be, a future outfielder here for the Padres moving forward. I think that would be a solid get. And then Javier Assad, right? He's not going to be, blowing you away by any means, but a guy that you can put at the back end of your rotation. He'll give you some innings there. So Javier Assad could be a nice picture for them to get back in return. If not him, they do have some pitching prospects in here that maybe you could send back in return. But if the Padres are not going to sign him long term, I would love for one of these teams to step up and get him. Moving on to the other guy at the top of their rotation, Dylan Cease. Now, I would love for the Padres to try and work out an extension with Michael King, but I don't see them being able to do that with Dylan Cease. He's been one of the best pitchers in baseball over the last few years, and he's a Scott Boras client. This guy is going to get a fat payday next offseason when he becomes a free agent. So I don't see him signing long-term with the Padres. I think Michael King, that's a bit more realistic. But Dylan Cease, I don't see it happening. But like I said, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball over the last few years, coming off another great year, 33 starts, just under 190 innings pitched, 3.47 ERA, 3.10 on the FIP. Very good strikeout numbers, 10.6 strikeouts per nine, 3 walks per nine, under a home run per nine. Has some of the best stuff in all of Major League Baseball. Now, I would love for Cease to go somewhere where he can help put that team over the top. And the one team that comes to mind for me are the Detroit Tigers. Could you imagine a 1-2 punch of Tarek Skubal and Dylan Cease? If that gets to the postseason, my goodness, that'd be very hard to beat. You got all these young guys coming up here, getting a good year of experience under their belt. I'm very excited to see what the Tigers do in 2025 by having a 1-2 like that at the top of the rotation. Here's the deal I have. We got Dylan Cease going to the Tigers, and I got a pretty interesting package here. So I have Casey Mize, former high draft pick not too long ago. He's been still, trying to find his way in the major leagues. Had a pretty decent year this past year. Still has a couple of years of control. A young starting pitcher that you could send back to the Padres, someone they can have in their rotation for the next couple of years. But I've also got Spencer Torkelson going back in this deal. Remember, I mentioned earlier with Luis Suarez, if they move him, maybe they could bring in Torkelson to replace him at first base. He really needs a change of scenery, in my opinion. He looked pretty solid a couple of years ago, but he really fell off this past year. He got sent back down to the minor leagues, did come up, looked a little better, but, Torkelson, I'm not sure what his long-term future is with the Tigers. Maybe the Padres can bring him in. They can get something going there. Now, I also have a competitive balance pick. Like I said, for the Padres, they've been getting rid of prospects over the last couple of years. This could be a good chance for them to draft someone that they scout, someone that they would like to add to their organization, and also have a pitching prospect here in Jaden Ham. As of right now, Ham is number 7 in their system. A pretty solid pitching prospect overall. Had himself a good year in the minors this past year, 2.64 ERA, 24 games, 23 starts. A guy with good velo, has a good curveball to go along with it. Slider changeup could use a bit more improvement there, but a guy that throws a decent amount of strikes. Good pitching prospect for them to get back. Now, another trade that I have could be with the Texas Rangers. Remember, Dylan Cease, before he went to the Padres last offseason, the Rangers were in the mix, so maybe this could be a second chance here for Texas. And could you imagine a rotation of Dylan Cease, Jacob deGrom, hopefully healthy, and Nathan Eovaldi as your 1, 2, 3, along with some of these young pitchers like Kumar Rocker. Maybe Jack Leiter can figure it out there. You got Tyler Mahle. I mean, my goodness, that would be a heck of a rotation. Here is the trade that I have. Dylan Cease going to the Rangers, back to the Padres. We got Josh Smith, Cody Bradford, and a outfield prospect in Alejandro Osuna. Now, Josh Smith was pretty solid this past year. Hit 258, 337 on base, slugging just under a 400, but a 111 WRC plus. A lot of versatility. He's going to give you some good athleticism as well. 11 stolen bases this past year. But I think a guy that could be pretty valuable for the Padres. You can put him out there in left field. He can move around, like I said. I think he'd be pretty productive for them. Also, they get back a cost control pitcher in Cody Bradford. Did have some injuries this past year, but pretty solid numbers overall. Alejandro Osuna. So Alejandro Osuna, as of right now, is number 16 in their system. But he's coming off a great year in the minor leagues at 292, a 362 on the on base, a 507 on the slugging, a decent amount of pop. It's a good all-around outfield prospect. I would love this for the Rangers. If they could add him to that rotation, that would be nasty. And then I'll also circle back to the Orioles once again. I mentioned them with Michael King. I think you could do a similar deal. I think you would just have to give a bit more than what you would have to give for Michael King. So pretty similar package here. I got Heston Kjerstad leading the away. And then I also threw in a couple of pitching prospects, Chase McDermott and Michael Ferret. Maybe you could do the Dean Kramer route, whatever it may be. I still think the Orioles and the Padres are great trade partners. I would love to see Heston Kjerstad get a chance, but Dylan Cease, he will definitely be an impact guy for a lot of teams out there. Before we wrap things up, I want to talk about a few players that I think are unlikely to get traded, starting with Fernando Tatis Jr. We all know how good this guy can be when he's healthy, one of the most electric players in all of Major League Baseball. He did miss some time this year, only 102 games played, but he still put up some very solid numbers. Hit 276, a 340 on base, a 492 slugging, a 135 WRC plus, 21 homers. Now, with Tatis, he is on a big contract, a 14-year, $338.2 million contract. He's making $20 million over the next couple of years before he starts to see a pay raise. But with Tatis, you got to remember, he is just going into the prime of his career. Still only 26 years old, and with the projections that he has moving forward, it's going to cost a lot to get him, even if a team is taking on the big contract that he has. There's so much surplus value with him. So that's where I'm kind of thinking it's probably going to be unlikely, along with the fact now the Padres, sure, they may be looking to clear some payroll, but at the same time, you got to put butts in the seats. They got to sell tickets. He is a fan favorite there. So I think in the end, it's more likely that he ends up staying with the Padres, but who knows? We've seen crazier things happen in the past. I mean, he would definitely help replenish the farm system there in San Diego, and that would be a big contract to get off their payroll. So who knows? Maybe it could be possible. Now, one team that I'm thinking of, they're kind of going through a bit of a, not a rebuild, but more of a reset. It would be the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, with the Cardinals, they still got a lot of talent here, and they do got some young players and some cost control players that maybe they could send back to San Diego. So one idea I have here is Fernando Tatis Jr. going back to the team that his dad played for, the St. Louis Cardinals, and back to the Padres. We got a pretty big package here. We got Lars Nootbaar, cost-controlled outfielder that's very cheap, that the Padres could have for the next few years. A young catcher in Ivan Herrera. Luis Campusano hasn't really worked out there, so that could be a future catcher for them. And the Cardinals, they got a lot of catching surplus within their organization. And then we get a couple of prospects. Quinn Matthews, one of the top pitching prospects in all of Major League Baseball, and Thomas Saggese. Maybe you could throw in another prospect here. Whatever it may be, this would be a big package to send back here to the Padres. Or maybe you could do the Detroit Tigers. I mean, hey, coming off a decent playoff run, a young team that I feel like could use a bit more thump in the middle of the order, and they got a lot of prospects, a lot of young players they could send back in a deal. I feel like this would be a pretty solid fit. So here's the deal I got. Fernando Tatis Jr. going to the Tigers, and back to the Padres. We got Parker Meadows, Reese Olson, Kevin McGonigal, and Jose Briseño. Now with Parker Meadows, that's an everyday outfielder that you can just plug right into your lineup, has a ton of control left until he gets to free agency. Reese Olson, young starting pitcher, a lot of upside there. You can put right into the rotation. And with Joe Musgrove out for the rest of the year, hey, Reese Olson could be a nice addition for the rotation, and he'll be there for a long time. Kevin McGonigal, a top 100 prospect. There's a lot of upside with him, a guy that makes a ton of contact, very disciplined hitter, good in the field as well, has some versatility. I think that could be a nice prospect for the Padres to add. And Jose Briseño had some injuries this past year, but a lot of upside with him. Just hit very well in the AFL, actually just got the Triple Crown in the AFL this past fall. That could be a very nice prospect for the Padres to get back. A lot of upside there. If not Parker Meadows, maybe you could do Max Clark, something like that, or Max Clark instead of Kevin McGonigal, whatever it may be. The Tigers, they have a lot of young talent that they could send back, and Fernando Tatis Jr. would be a star for them moving forward. I've also seen some other people mention Xander Bogaerts, maybe even Manny Machado, because they have huge contracts, but it is going to be very difficult to move these guys. Both of these guys' contracts are very underwater. Manny Machado, right, just re-signed a new extension. He's going to be getting paid a lot of money, but he's going into the latter part of his career, a very underwater value as of right now. And Xander Bogaerts, my goodness. Listen, I would have loved for the Red Sox to have brought him back, but when the Padres gave him an 11-year deal, I'm thinking, what the heck are you doing here? Out of all three, I guess I would say probably Tatis, because obviously there's a ton of value there. But again, getting to the fact, I don't know if teams are going to be willing, to take on, there's a bit of risk with him. when you think about the injuries, when you think about the suspension that he had, and again, do the Padres even want to move him? I don't know. But let me know some trades that you would like to see for Fernando Tatis Jr. Can you come up with some other trades here for Xander Bogaerts, Manny Machado? Tell me some Dylan Cease trades down below. Michael King, maybe even Yu Darvish. Maybe they could move him. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. But the Padres, I think they're going to be making some moves here in the next month or so. Let me know the moves that you would like to see them make down below in the comments. Do you think the Padres can be competitive in 2025? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. But everyone, that's all I got for right now. If you can on the way out, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. We're trying to get to 50K by opening day. But everyone, that's all I got for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.